Welcome. I'm Amanda Emerald, and I am the chair of the Sunshine Coast Board of Education. And I am pleased to be hosting tonight's public budget consultation with two members of our senior team, Superintendent of Schools, Kate Kerr. Do you want to say hello?
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you this evening.
And our Secretary Treasurer, Nick Westwick. Do you want to say hello?
Hello, that's me. Yeah, glad to be here.
Great. And now we just need our slide deck.
All right. Give me a quick second.
So thank you everyone for joining. Public budget consultation is a really important part of the work of the board and helps inform our next steps. So I'm glad that you have taken the time out of your day to join us in the conversation. As always, we want to start off our meetings in a good way. So I want to acknowledge with great respect the unceded and traditional lands and waters of both the Squamish and the Sechelt Nation, where we gather, learn, and collaborate with one another. And it's already dark outside, and you can feel the change of the seasons as we roll towards the winter solstice. So I hope that you are all in a cozy place and able to hold a moment of appreciation for where you are joining us from this evening. I'm going to pass it over to Nick to talk about some housekeeping things.
Absolutely, thank you. So we're doing this via a webinar format, and there is a Q&A feature where you can send your questions. And if that isn't working for you, you're welcome to also send me an email directly, and I'll check my email before we end the webinar to make sure we haven't missed anything. And with that, we'll get right into timelines. So the budget cycle involves a number of consultations from November to January and some even into February, where we reach out to a variety of stakeholders, staff, and this is our annual public budget consult. The February Operations Committee is our venue for bringing those initial considerations forward and indicating sort of what we've heard and where we see areas of focus. Mid-March, March 15th, there's a statutory requirement for the ministry to make a funding announcement. And then in early April, we are allocating funds out to our schools and departments so that they can make staffing decisions, presenting the budget recommendations in the April Operations Committee, and then approving the budget in any event before June 30th, which is the end of our fiscal year. And July 1, we start implementing the changes and the budget for the new year. I found this to be an interesting quote that really gets to the heart of why we consult around budget. It's really to help inform the needs, beliefs, and priorities of the community, and have that information drive our decision making, and so that we make better decisions. So I liked this quote in particular for that purpose.
I just want to talk a little bit about the what drives a budget. And up at the top, the first cog in the diagram is the strategic plan. And right now, the board and the district are working at creating a new strategic plan for the next 5 years. And this is going to be the roadmap for our budgeting over that period of time. It's a really important tool to set the tone and the direction. And so the board has a key role in developing and approving that strategic plan. And that is going to have a lasting impact over the time of the plan. And as we see in slides later on tonight, you'll see how that strategic plan moves into the other areas and ends up influencing the budget. So I'm going to pass it over to Nick, who's going to talk about then where it goes over to operations and how we connect that strategic planning to the budget.
Yeah, and with that overhaul of the strategic plan, we're also looking at refreshing our administrative planning and operational planning as well. So we'll be we're in the process of updating our school growth planning process to ensure alignment. We're also going to be updating our operational planning process to make sure that we're aligned with the plan, and looking forward to the increased focus that we anticipate to come out of that. From there, many of those decisions, though not all, or many of those operational plans, though not all, will have budgetary implications. Some of those plans will be able to be implemented within existing budgets or by shifting how our internal budgets are allocated, and some of them may require additional resources. With our format, with the way that the school districts are funded, it's not a question of adding resources. It's a question of rebalancing and reprioritizing our resources to make sure that they're achieving the highest and best good. One of the other factors, obviously, that impacts our budget is our student enrollment. And the funding model from the ministry has a significant component that is based on student enrollment, as well as some additional supports for unique student needs, as well as unique geographic features. So the fact that we're a relatively small school district with many spread out communities, there is a mechanism in the funding model that provides some additional support for that as well. Interestingly, on this slide, you can see our overall operational capacity, meaning how many students we can accommodate. That's the green line at the top there. And you can see that regardless of which projection we follow or we anticipate is likely, there's still capacity within the district. Now, some of that needs to be managed as we have pockets of overcrowding and other areas where we have a significant amount of space. And there are approaches and administrative approaches to address that. But it's interesting to see the difference between the BC Stats projection, which is the blue line, and the Baragar projection, which is a consulting firm that we've engaged to help project our enrollment levels in a more accurate way, considering migration trends, considering birth rates, historical birth rates, and so on. And so you can see basically a range of anticipated enrollment. Obviously, both projections indicate an increase in anticipated enrollment for the next few years. And then at some point within the next 8 or 9 years at the latest, we'll see our enrollment start to taper off a little bit. Now that projection is updated each year, and we'll keep an eye on this and see how well we're doing and how the projection is updated with new information and new trends. But this is an important part of our planning process as we look to the future. One of the areas where this is most impactful, obviously, is the number of teachers in the district. And as you can see, the green line on this graph represents our student enrollment numbers over time. And on a year-by-year basis, we also show the teacher full-time equivalent, or FTE, in the yellow bar or the orange bars. So you can see that they generally mirror one another in terms of increases and decreases until you get to about the 2017-2018 year, which was the year of the Teacher Supreme Court victory, where additional resources and funding were provided to school districts. The other notable thing on this graph that you'll see is in the 2020-2021 year, which of course was COVID, the beginning of COVID, where we saw a dip in enrollment, but we were able to maintain our staffing levels due to the provincial funding mechanisms, as well as tapping into some of our surplus funds. And generally speaking, we see increases in both enrollment and in staffing, which is good news for a school district. And although is good news, does present itself with some operational challenges. But worth noting here is that student-teacher ratio has come down from about a high of about 16.1 down to the current 14.7. which is all teachers in the district, whether they directly work directly in the classroom to support students, or whether they fill a support role such as a teacher librarian or school counselor. And this slide has been updated since earlier today with the most recent financial information. You can see that about 84% of our budget is salaries and benefits, with services and supplies the remaining 16%. It's broken down here by employee group. So salaries by employee group. Employee benefits represents about 15% of our budget, or around about 8.5 million last year. And then services and supplies, which includes things like our transportation contract, things like maintenance expenses, any furniture in the schools, and really anything that is purchased by our schools and departments. And then over to our decentralized funding model. I think, Amanda, you wanted to speak to this.
Yeah, so decentralized funding is a policy of the board. It's policy number 15, and it's about shifting the decision-making over funding wherever possible to the source of decision-making. And so in a school board context, that is at the school level. And we do that because it allows schools to be flexible and nimble and meet the unique needs of their learning community, while also promoting their school culture and neighborhood culture as well. And so some of the benefits of this is that we're able to collect, or the school is able to collect, greater input from staff and students and public in those areas. And what we know when we are able to be closer to the decision is that we make better decisions for the learners and for the community. And that schools feel really empowered about having that ability to take control of those decisions. And then it also requires that the school, the staff, right through to the principal, take on leadership for the learning and collecting that information by way of their own consultation process and conversation. And it also is a great way to have students be engaged in their own student councils or whatever leadership forum or capacities that they have at their schools to help talk about things that are meaningful for them. So wherever possible, and it's not always possible or makes the most sense, but wherever possible, moving that decision-making around that funding to the places where it's going to have the most impact.
One of my favorite meetings of the year is our annual consultation with our district student leadership team. This is a group of secondary level students who whose role is to support student voice, and who we meet with on a regular basis throughout the year. Recently, I was able to meet with that group out at Pender Harbor Secondary and heard a number of pieces of feedback from them. And we framed that in terms of a symbol that we've begun using the last few years around the braid, and weaving together all of the initiatives that we have through these 4 categories. So that land-based learning, transformative learning, compassionate systems, and equity and inclusion. And what we heard from students aligns closely with each of these. The first thing that students wanted to talk about this year was the need for public transit improvements, both in terms of service level and equity. They're really keen on the idea of free transit for youth, and we're really excited about the possibility of that happening. They also are interested in some outdoor learning and physical activity support, such as ninja warrior skills courses and monkey bars and things at the secondary level, which is interesting. And we talked a bit about school fields and some of the drought conditions that we've encountered in the last couple of years, which have impacted our ability to really make significant gains in terms of the quality of the fields. And they had a great suggestion of rain collection systems. So that was interesting. We heard from them that integration of instruction with external supports and services and specialized technology for personalized learning, and programs, of course, for personalized learning would be important. And things like docs in schools, things like mental health came up throughout that conversation and was emphasized. On that note, compassionate systems focus around child and youth mental health services in schools and other mental health supports and counseling, particularly counseling at the secondary level, and reducing the barriers to that secondary level counseling. So some great feedback, and always value the thoughts and interests of those students. Kate, did you want to add anything to this one, or no? All right.
So Amanda spoke about, what drives the budget and talked about that strategic plan and the implementation. So I think connecting those pieces through current and continuing priorities. And so one of the things that we did is sort of group together, or thematically put together, our current and continuing priorities. So we've heard about supporting the mental health and well-being of students and staff, as well as improving equity and inclusion, the universal design for learning in all of our classrooms, and of course, the curriculum and assessment changes with the new reporting policy. And to support both of these and do them in a good way is the human resources review, which we did last year, and then our most recent implementation. And we're going to speak to some of the specifics after we share some data on these three main areas as we continue through. So as you can see, over, I would say probably the last 8 to 10 years, the Sunshine Coast School District has really focused on increasing and improving teacher counselors. And so within the contract, we are required to provide 5.0 full-time equivalent teacher counselors for the entire district. But currently we are at 12.4 full-time equivalent counselors. So really seeing that voice, not only from students, but also from staff and our parents and caregivers, that mental health and supports for mental health were really, really important. The other piece that we had heard was around specialized staff in specialized area of inclusion and behavior. And so the inclusion support team has been instrumental in doing that work. It was a pilot project for 3 years. And last year, we moved that pilot into a continuing operational budget as we move forward. That team consists of inclusion support teachers, educational assistants, family support navigators, as well as other areas of supports for schools. So we wanted to just show some data. So this data is just from the first 3 months in the school year. So the district inclusion support team has received 158 individual student referrals. So referrals from the schools. So from 14 different school teams. So you can see this specialized support is supporting all of our schools, 118 of which are actively being supported. And what that means is there is someone, either the whole team going into the school or one person going in from the school to work on different supports, whether that be supporting a new teacher, a new inclusion support teacher, whether that be some educational assistant mentorship, or it could be supporting the school-based team. And the difference between the 118, which are actively being supported, means that those teams are going in on a regular basis. The other piece of data that we wanted to share was specifically around our family support navigators. And so these are qualified individuals with social work backgrounds. And so they really provide a bridge from families to the school. And so supporting our families and our students. And they also do a lot of preventative work and workshopping for staff around behavior, workshopping for staff around inclusion and belonging, positive discipline. But again, you can see that they are active in all of our school sites, supporting a variety of different families and students and staff.
Part of what we wanted to talk about as well was the data that sort of informs how we're doing or shows how we're doing as a district, shows how we're progressing in some key areas, and our path to having this make meaning for us is to start with the high level data, and then which we call satellite data, or rather Shane Sapir calls satellite data, and this is a graphic that's borrowed from their book, and then drilling down into map and identifying specific trends, looking for skill gaps, and then getting right down into street data. And so having things like student forums and classroom discussions to help inform how we're doing and help us shift and pivot to best serve those students. So we'll start with some high level data and then drill down. The first, one of the key metrics that we look at is our completion rates. So we look at, this is a 6-year completion rate, pretty standard metric. The yellow line is the provincial completion rate, and the blue line is our district and how we're doing relative to that. So you can see in the past couple of years, we've actually exceeded the provincial average. In the most recent set of data that we have access to at the moment, we're seeing a graduation or a completion rate of 92.7%. And, getting down into some, actually, Kate, do you want to speak to this slide?
Sure. So one of the things to sort of situate the next few slides is that there's the framework for enhancing student learning policy. And so one of those pieces around that policy is for supporting growth and achievement among particular groups of students. So that includes students who hold Indigenous ancestry, children and youth in care, and students with disabilities or diverse abilities. So we really take a look at those specific data sets as we move forward as well.
So starting with the 6-year completion rate for Indigenous students, you can see that both the provincial trend line and our district trend line is increasing, with a couple of cohorts where you can see some exceptions there. And we tend to exceed the provincial average in our completion rates for Indigenous students, but there is still a gap there between the completion rates of Indigenous students and the overall district rate. And we certainly want to address that. The most recent cohort of Indigenous student completion was at 82%. And as a reminder, our district average is 92%. So we want to take a look into that cohort or that group for sure. One of the other areas of focus is students with designations. Again, you can see that the overall trend is increasing, and in this most recent set of data, that cohort of students did exceed the provincial average, and there has been a gap between our 6-year completion rate versus the province, and certainly something we want to maintain a focus on as well. And then finally, the 6-year completion rate for children in care. This, you'll see a lot of variability from 1 year to the next, as this is a relatively small cohort, a small group of children. And so you can see, depending on a few students, either completing or not completing, you can see significant swings in the data here. But certainly the last couple of years, we've seen positive results approaching our district average. We tend to take, especially with smaller cohorts, we take these with a grain of salt and want to make sure that we're not losing sight of these kids and making sure that we're continuing to focus on this group of kids, obviously a vulnerable group, to make sure that we are improving the results for them and continuing, hopefully, along that current trajectory.
So this next set of data, actually the SCTA presented to the board in September, the results of a survey done in June of 2023. And I think when we think back to our slide previously about current and continuing priorities, this only emphasizes that piece around adult well-being and how important that is and needs to be a focus as we move forward. So this particular data set shows workload and stress compared to previous years has definitely increased. Reported feelings of workload and stress, compared to previous years. And then if you look at the bottom there, how would you describe your current level of stress? So I think this is really good information for us to consider in our budget consultation and how we can continue to strengthen the work in that area. And we do have some good news with our human resources review and implementation that I will share in a little bit.
So recognizing that that's an area of concern and an area of focus, we asked for some information from our EAP provider, our Employee and Family Assistance Program provider, and they sent this slide around the national average or national responses in terms of some of those key factors, both the source of the stress and the drilling down into the work-related stress, what the sources of those stressors were. And there's some interesting pieces in this data that we can draw from. So first of all, you can see that relative to other sectors, the education sector has a lower level of work stress on average, but a higher level of stress when it comes to both equally personal and work. So kind of interesting that it's not exclusively work that is a higher level of stress in this sector, but can be a combination of things. Related to the work related stress, we see a difference in terms of the other sectors, that the volume of work is less of a factor than it is around performance demands and the feeling of lack of support. So being a more complex kind of an organization, we're not building widgets, we're helping support human competency. That is a high level of demand on people given its complexity, and this was interesting in that regard.
So this just gives an overview of the specific EAP data for people who are accessing this support. So EAP is Employee Assistance Program. And so it just gives you a general idea of staff who are accessing this particular support. Again, stress being the most. And here we show just the EAP data from 2021 and 22 to 2022 and 2023. And interestingly enough, the use of EAP has dropped in the last year. And that could be for a variety of reasons. We had an interesting conversation today at committee or operations committee. And it could be that people, although reporting that stress is something that is significant and well-being is something significant, is that perhaps they don't know how to access the EAP assistance program. And maybe we need to look at some creative ways of letting them know about that information. And so we've already had some good ideas come today from both the SCTA and CUPE. So that's great.
You're looking forward to the year 2030 when we don't have to say 2030 anymore. We can just say 30
Yes.
Of 2022, 2023. I know I am.
So just wanting to circle back to the current and continuing priorities. So when you think about supporting the mental health and well-being of students and staff, we've really talked about that increasing in counseling support in schools. We've also really increased compassionate systems leadership and that piece about self, teams, and systems. And that has spread throughout the district. And thanks to all of our partner groups, DPAC, SCTA, and CUPE have really been on board with sharing this widely, and we continue to grow that work. Also recognizing that multi-format professional learning is really important for staff, and considering the complexities, that Nick has actually talked about with the changes in the reporting order, how complex learning that is. So looking at having a diverse opportunity for staff, as well as specialized district inclusion support team, as well as the wellness grants. When we think about supporting the learning for equity, inclusion, universal design for learning, and these changes in curriculum and assessment, is where we want to make sure that we're having that support is in communicating student learning, as well as our ongoing work with equity and diversity and inclusion. So it really is that human resources review and implementation that is supporting both of those points. So really happy to report that we've had improved fill rates, specifically for our teaching staff. And so there's fewer unfilled absences. And what that means is we can build some of the learning into the day for people. And I can say that it's already been shared with us that stress levels in schools are down, partly because people are feeling like they will be replaced, or that they have an opportunity to do some of their work through release time in the day. So that's been fantastic. And that's on the teacher side. I do want to acknowledge that we still are working on the educational assistant fill rate. And I know the HR team has been focusing on that. Of course, anticipated increase in capacity of HR as well has been proven to be supportive, and the new processes and procedures to improve service levels and really embrace an HR vision.
All right. So, some early considerations as we look ahead to next year, things that we're anticipating that are going to impact our operating budget. As we improve on our fill rate for sick leave, our sick leave costs are likely going to go up. We've seen them increase since COVID, of course, and we'll likely see them jump to the highest yet, as a result of our ability to replace more staff. So we'll have to plan for that in the budget. There's also some inflationary pressure, a significant amount of inflationary pressure in the last several years. And collective agreement and in fact, some exempt salary costs have been funded by the province. The cost of our student transportation system, the cost of the materials that we purchase to maintain and support our schools, and the cost of what's being purchased by the schools themselves have increased fairly sharply. It's also worth noting that the cost of food is ever increasing, and so our food program, although there is 3-year funding to support that, it is a fairly static amount of funding per year, and so we'll need to potentially consider that. We know that our technology team is small and mighty, but there have been some challenges in terms of recruiting and maintaining even that level of staffing. So we'll need to consider how we support technology throughout the district. The teacher laptop term is up, and so we'll need to look at refreshing the teacher laptops in the next year. And the cost of technology has been increasing. The collective bargaining process, we're looking ahead to that starting up for next year. Student transportation costs and white fleet renewal, meaning the vehicles that support our technology teams, that support our maintenance teams. So our student transportation contract does have an inflationary factor built into it each year. The cost of fuel and so on has an impact, and certainly none of these pressures are directly funded with any increase to the overall block. So the one sort of light at the end of the tunnel is that continued increase in overall student enrollment, which will help mitigate at least some of these. On the capital planning side of things, we're looking ahead to our capital plan. We operate through the provincial structure of effectively a grant-based system where we request capital funding for projects on a project basis. We've recently completed our long-range facility plan refresh, and these are some of the things that were included in that long-range facility plan. So upgrading our schools and retrofitting our schools to include gender-neutral washrooms and change rooms, which has a positive impact on student safety for all students, which is what we found at some of our sites. The transition to electric school buses, which has already begun. We've ordered 2 electric school buses, and the remainder of our fleet, just as an aside, has transitioned to propane and away from diesel. So you may have seen less diesel fumes and less blue smoke if you happen to be behind a school bus going up and down the coast. Another area of capital request is to expand Gibson's Elementary, as we've seen enrollment increase there. And we have, I think, 3 portables on site at present. We're requesting funding to complete a structural upgrade or replacement of what's known as the Sunshine Building and the former Seashelt Elementary Building, where alternative school programs are currently held. And additionally, our school food program pilot is being operated currently out of that site. And then our transportation facility is something worth considering as we expand and get into owning our own fleet. Having a transportation facility where we're not renting or reliant on a contractor to be able to find a suitable facility is an area of focus. And finally, technology infrastructure, the switches, the servers, the backbone of our connected schools is due for a significant refresh. So some of the things that we're considering. And that brings us to the end of our session. So with that, I'll invite anyone who's participating to submit a question. I see that we have one question already from Tracy, and the question was, you showed a teacher-student FTE ratio. Has there been similar increases to EA FTE or education assistant FTE to student ratio that can be shared? And it's an interesting question. It's a good question. I'm sure that we have the data, but I haven't compiled it for today's presentation. We've certainly seen an increase in overall FTE and budget related to EAs. And it's also worth noting the inclusion support funding, the number of students who are drawing that inclusion support funding, designated students, has been increasing. I see that Kate would also like to chime in on this question.
No, I was actually just trying to monitor the question and say that it's answered live.
Gave me a note that says Kate Kerr would like to answer this question.
Oh no, I was pushing that button for you, Nick.
All right, fair enough. Okay, and with that, I would welcome any additional questions. Again, the Q&A section at the in your Zoom window is where you can find that, and I'll also take a look at my email address and see if there's any emails that have come in. I see that our attendees are many of the same folks who have seen this presentation in an earlier iteration earlier today. Okay, Miyuki has a question. Is there any specific area in the budget consultation you are looking for input and feedback from DPAC and PACs? I mean, I think we're looking for feedback from DPAC and PACs about what the areas of focus are that are front of mind for you. So what are the problems that you're seeing out there? What are the successes that you'd like to see more of? But there isn't a specific area of focus. We're really intending to share what we see and what we're noticing and invite feedback on that. So absolutely would love to hear whatever DPAC or individual PACs have to say. We're currently, and actually it's a great prompt because we're currently looking at our consultation approach to engage directly with parents. So beyond PAC and DPAC, what can we do to get feedback from parents and hopefully, you know, encourage additional conversation, additional data points, and additional you know, suggestions. So one of the thoughts we have around that is the idea of a parent survey. I know we're all surveyed to death these days, but in terms of really, you know, not downloading that to our principals and PACs and really trying to get a broader reach is something we considered. So would love to have your feedback on that. All right, another question from an anonymous attendee. I very much appreciate the transparency and comprehensiveness around the data shared. Thanks very much for that, Kate. I didn't know you could send that feedback anonymously, but all right. Another anonymous attendee asks, does the strategic plan inform budget decisions? And the answer is absolutely. And it's also, it's a more nuanced answer because our strategic plan is currently in the process of being refreshed. And so the current plan is about 4.5 years old, something like that. And itself was sort of lightly refreshed in its last iteration. So it is getting a bit long in the tooth. And while we still use that to inform our decisions, we're also looking ahead to the current strategic planning process, the feedback that we gather through that process and areas of focus, and where that will take us as well, because we need to make sure that we stay current with what the current needs are. And yeah. Anything else you wanted to add on that, Kate?
No, you did a great job.
All right. We've got 18 more minutes, so we can either sit here in silence waiting for more questions to come in, or we can wait just one more minute and assume that we've done a fairly okay job at conveying the information. And you know, I also want to stress that you have my email address if there are questions that you have and you want to connect after the fact or have a conversation about this. My door is open. So I know all of the attendees. I've met you all personally and would be happy to answer your questions. And Tracy, to your point, yeah, looking at the EAFTE is certainly something we can take a look at. All right, Tracy. Oh, there we go. Just say that we're going to sit here for 18 minutes in silence and the questions start coming in. So Tracy asks, nerd question, her words, how accurate have the BC stats and Beauregard projections been short-term and long-term? Well, you know, it depends. We certainly didn't see COVID coming in the Beauregard projections, but generally speaking, they're accurate within a couple of % at the district level. They're quick to stress that their projections need to be informed by local data, local information and knowledge around what we're seeing in terms of development activity and migration activity. So how accurate? Reasonably accurate. But it's worth noting as well that even their data, it tends to be based on birth information, where there's about a 5-year delay. So whenever there's that much delay between the data and when those kids actually arrive through our doors, there tends to be some fluctuation. So yeah. And then BC stats projections, typically we don't really look at those in a lot of detail each year. We pulled that as another data point in terms of our long range facility plan, and thought it was interesting to share because it tells, or it projects a bit of a different story than what Beauregard is telling us. So yeah, if you have a more accurate system to project enrollment, I'd love to have it, because there's always some uncertainty there. Matt asks, there has been discussion about, sorry, I should have asked, anybody else want to talk about Beauregard projections or, okay. Matt asks, there has been discussion about our FTE with teachers and EAs to student ratio. How do you determine your maintenance staff numbers? Generally speaking, our maintenance staff numbers are fairly stable from one year to the next. Certainly, one of the points of information that we pay serious attention to is our work order numbers, and also, you know, what we're hearing from our school leaders and our district leaders around service levels. And so, as we see, if we hear that our service levels are low in a certain area, then we'll add staffing. And, you know, over the course of the last 10 years or so, we've transitioned from a structure with what we called site maintenance worker to moving towards more Red Seal staff with specified or specific areas of focus, such as electrician, plumber, HVAC, and so on, to give us a greater level of capacity. Oh, and Kate prompted me via text message that I'm also going to be going to DPAC to hear from parents. So thanks for that prompt, Kate. And I think that's coming up in January. I'll be attending. You'll likely the DPAC will get some version of or a very similar slide deck, maybe a little more condensed, because you know, it's tough to take up too much time on that agenda, but that's another area where we will be getting some parental feedback.
This is our wait time, just in case someone is
Well,
typing up something.
well, while we're waiting, I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to hear about what we're doing, and to Kate and Nick for doing such a great job of presenting our process and our data, and the thoughts that go into creating our budget.
All right. One last question coming in. Will we receive any monetary figures on each budget lines at the DPAC meeting? And I think, you know, we certainly share monetary figures as we have access to them. I'd be curious about what you're looking for in particular in terms of the figures. We shared a little bit of information at a high level about, you know, where our resources go. So I'd certainly welcome feedback. Miyuki, you can send me an email in terms of what you're looking for. You know, where there are if we're looking at GL codes, there are, you know, tens of thousands of lines, and I don't think that would be a good use of everyone's time. But if you're wanting a little more detail than what we showed today, I'd be happy to share that. So send me a note, Miyuki. All right, Miyuki says, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to ask questions and be part of the conversation. And Matt also has a question. Can we at DPAC look at the current asset lines of your budget, please? So all of our financial information is available on our website. There's including our balance sheet, as well as income statement and so on. And so if you're looking at assets, that would be an area to look at. But if there's a specific area of interest or focus, you know, let me know. All right, Matt says, all right, thank you. Okay. 11 more minutes. If there's any final questions. All right. Well, anyways, if there are any final questions, don't hesitate to send me an email. nweswick@st46.bc.ca. Miyuki sent another last minute question. Is there surplus info available on the site? I love this, by the way. Can you tell that I'm a budget nerd? I just love all this focus on budget. Is there surplus information available on the site? It's like I prompted you with my mind, Miyuki. There's actually a document on our budget section of our site called the Financial Statement Discussion and Analysis. We spend quite a bit of time preparing that to show where the surplus comes from. We also, as part of our budget planning process, put together a plan for how to utilize any surplus beyond our 2% threshold that we need to maintain per the board policy. So in the coming fiscal year, we're looking at a slight uptick in terms of the available surplus for distribution, going from about 1.1 to about 1.3 million of our $55 million plus budget is available for distribution in the coming fiscal year. And we'll be talking a bit about how best to use those funds as well. Typically, the majority of those funds go back out to schools. I just want to stress that as well, to help them with their staffing and all their other purchases. And we've also used those funds for specific projects. So, White Fleet refresh was an area of focus from last year. So some of the trucks that we've been able to purchase this year. Anonymous attendee says, excellent presentation. Thank you. I put that one in there myself. And Matt says, can we change our tech source from Google to Apple or Microsoft Education package, please? I think that's something we can bring forward to our tech committee. I think in fact, I think we use all three of those platforms in our schools, depending on what the need is. One of the advantages I have to share this because I just saw the invoice come through my desk today for a number of Chromebooks where the per unit cost is like $150 or something per unit. And so where we need sort of basic word processing, that's really great value. Whereas if we have specialized programming, that might not get the job done. But certainly looking at embracing Microsoft, I think is sort of the crux of your question or your suggestion there. We are looking at the district level, at least, more fully embracing Microsoft. And what we hear from our teachers is that there are a number of valuable tools out there, and teachers adapt based on what their needs are in the classroom. We like to try and be as agnostic as we can so that we give those options. But there's always a balance, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make, between value and functionality. And we try and find the right balance there, but would love to talk to you more about that. Matt says, have we looked at leasing company fleet vehicles instead of purchasing such fleet from vendors? We do look at leasing. We've looked at leasing for our assets. The main advantage to leasing in business typically is the tax advantage, where that a full amount is written off. The full amount of the lease payment is written off, saves on accounting costs, and is easier to write off the value of those. In our context, it tends to be, we don't pay taxes as an organization. And so that tends to not be as good a value as purchasing the white fleet and retaining those white fleet for their useful life. Matt says, I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to such discussions. Great, me too. All right. I've thought that we were done a number of times already. I think what we're going to do is hold questions for now, invite folks to send me an email. I'm going to stop paying attention to the Q&A, and we're just gonna park it there. But feel free to send me an email. And thanks again to everybody, to echo Amanda's words, for joining us today and taking the time out of your evening.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a lovely night.